Hello and welcome to Copilot Starter Kit Part 2. Really, this is part of our Microsoft 365 Champions community and trying to provide some value to that community as well as to, other small businesses that, are thinking about AI, struggling with AI, not sure what to do with AI, including ourselves, by the way, which is what this session is going to be a bit about. Um, uh, there's some phrases or sayings out there that I think a common one is eat your own dog food. We prefer to use the phrase of drink our own champagne just because it tastes better. Mostly, humble champagne doesn't always taste better. But anyway, so we are just going to share today some information about what we've learned. I think some mistakes we made and some pivots that we're taking relative to trying to figure out how to drive AI inside of our own organization. And the drink your champagne comment is really saying we're also trying to figure we're trying to figure this out not only for us, but because if we can figure out something that works or lessons learned, we want to share it with everyone else, right? And try and help that be a part of your journey. So maybe you can avoid making a mistake or avoid a pitfall that we've taken, right? And that's one of the reasons why we try and go first in any kind of new technology that is deployed. So we wanted to start today with an interesting article that just came out recently in Forbes. I think it might have been published in multiple areas, but Forbes in particular. We'll post it in the comments. But the headline was 77% of global workers find that AI has increased workloads as opposed to decreased them and hampered productivity. And a sub-headline says, global study reveals bad news about employee AI skills. And at first glance, when I read that, I remember being like, "Well, that's not good." But then I realized, look, AI. I was just talking to a group about this morning. I mean, AI, as far as its general release to the public, is less than 2 years old. It was November 22, and Copilot just got released to small medium businesses, in January of this year. So we're talking about a 7-month-old technology as far as trying to figure out how to change behavior, what roles does it fit, fitting it into your budget, because by the way, it came out in January, not Q4, where we could have known what the costs were going to be. So like it just all these things, which makes sense that we have to learn how to use AI. We need to figure out what roles AI and which AI tools fit for which roles. And so it doesn't surprise me that initially, whenever you're making change, that it's going to create more of a pain up front than it is a long term. And Nina, I'm going to say one other thing, and then kind of hand it over to you for some thoughts. But we AI is something that just because the new tools out there, there are people in your organization. In fact, probably everyone in your organization that are busy. And so just by throwing a tool at them without education, without prescription, without guidance, is going to create more work. And there's a good percentage of the people in your organization that just don't want the extra work, right? They're like, I don't want to take the extra work on. I don't want to figure it out. I'm already good at my job doing it this way. And now you're asking me to figure something new out, which it's not that I mind using the tool, but I don't want to figure it out. And so I think a segue to what we're talking about, but then Nina, just toss it over to you, is how do you identify the subset of people in your organization that are curious about figuring out, that don't get frustrated with change, that are game for trying to find new ways and more efficient and productive ways to do things, tapping into that group so that then you can be prescriptive with the other set of your organization. So ultimately, that's kind of the lesson learned in theory that we've been going down. And that article that came out, I just saw it yesterday. I don't know if it came out yesterday, but it is one that just kind of reinforced that thinking for me. So Nina, I don't know, what's your take at this juncture based on this conversation?
Yeah, I was just actually thinking back to when starting my career as a Microsoft trainer. We won't say when that was, but it was a while back. And I remember those, the first year of training some of these Office products, which were pretty new at the time, and working through Excel and PowerPoint and Word. And I remember that those initial training sessions were very much, this is the tool and this is what it can do. Back then I realized I kind of get the blank stare from people like,
Mm-hmm.
this is great. How is this going to work for me? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's part of that learning curve, and kind of how my training changed over the years was, well, let's try to take what we're learning here from the tool and see how exactly that's going to be applied in your particular role, in your day to
Mm-hmm.
day. And I think that that lesson holds true now as well. It's and trying to connect those dots between this is the tool and this is how I'm going to
Yeah.
use it. I think that's probably where some of this fatigue is coming in a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
because even in my own role, and it's a I love the new technology and I love experimenting with this, but that's been kind of the one takeaway for me, is just how intentional I have to be about it,
Mm-hmm.
and figuring out, like, this is how it's going to apply. I'm not going to use every single thing that Copilot can do, and I think that's the challenge, is like, how am I actually going to use this for my particular role, and then helping other people to connect those dots. So I think that change management piece that you've just referred to in the article is kind of where that some of that fatigue's coming in. But I think over time, as I did at the beginning of my career, eventually you start figuring it out. And then
Yep.
as people come to training, you're like, oh, I have a really good sense of how and where you'll be able to use this, and kind of help them kind of, jumpstart that piece, and get to where they need to go quicker. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and you made me think of a couple other things that, in fact, I was just talking to. Like I said, there's a little AI user group that meets. They happened to meet at our office this morning, so I was able to. They allowed me to swing by and kind of observe. And one of the gentlemen there, who was a professor at a local university, mentioned that there's one that that there's a fear, and sometimes in some of these, if you're a really Excel power user, and like, you might be the guru that can basically make Excel do wizardry, which I'm not that kind of person, but and that, like, that's part of job security, because, like, you're the one person that really can do this, and then AI comes along and it basically can teach everybody else how to do that with just doing prompts. And so, like, there's some fear in, like, learning that. And I think, so one of the comments that was made, and that I think is applicable, is that, like, but just being able to build a formula isn't really that valuable. I mean, it is, but if you can use AI to do that, but what other more exciting, more powerful, more valuable things can you do if you don't have to spend all that time trying to type away a long formula, or uh, in an Excel document, for example. The other thing I think is that, not everyone is good at naturally connecting dots. You were kind of alluding to that, right? But how can I do this for me? So you might be able to show something, but just because you show something, some people will connect the dots, like, oh, the light bulb goes off, and they're like, I see how this thing, even though you didn't tell me how it solves a problem, you like, this thing can help me solve this problem that I have in my job. Not everyone's good at that. So I think that's the other thing that I think is a reality that we all have to deal with. And I think the last part is and then I think is a segue to the rest of the session here is, look, I always want to be transparent. We lean into Copilot because it's part of the Microsoft ecosystem. We understand the security components of it and how it matches and fits with organizations who are using Microsoft 365 and SharePoint and Teams, and Azure, et cetera. However, we also acknowledge at the same time that it's not necessarily the right tool for everybody. So that's the other problem. Is like realizing that this isn't necessarily the right tool for everybody in your organization. We're not saying go out and buy Copilot for everybody in your organization. That's probably not going to be the right fit. But and at the same time, the AI tools right now, there's other articles I'm sure you can find out there, because I've seen them, that are like, AI sucks. Well, yeah, it's 7 months old, right? I mean, it's brand new. It's just, and so I think that sometimes those articles might be reinforcing your belief, like, I don't need to deal with AI yet. Our challenge is, and again, this is why we're doing this session, is that we believe you need to start educating yourself, start identifying a couple of people in your organization, or a handful of people in your organization, to start thinking through these things. Because chances are, if you're the owner of a business, or the operator of a business, or department head, chances are people in your team or in your organization are already using some form of AI. It just might be under the covers, and you might not realize it's happening. So we do think you should start educating yourself, because if you wait 2 or 3 years, we genuinely believe you're going to be behind, and you're going to miss. And so start figuring it out now, so that you can stay ahead of where the world's going, or at least keep up with where the world's going. So that's it, Nina. Maybe we should segue to some of the things we've done so far, and then get into the lessons learned.
Yeah, and I think we touched on these briefly in our previous session, but really some of the things that are also recommended by Microsoft themselves is really thinking about governance, who has access to what. So my tech is my client in that respect, and we meet regularly going through different reports, permissions, clutter, that type of thing to make sure that there aren't kind of dark recesses in our tenant where maybe confidential or sensitive information has been living. So that's an ongoing thing as well. We've done some initial Copilot training at both of our locations, Copilots and Cocktails, where we've invited internal staff to come and attend and just see kind of what's possible in our lab environment. So that's been kind of fun. We set up a Viva Engage community for our Copilot champions. And then we did an initial small group where we assigned Copilot seats. And Nate, I'll throw that back to you just a sec, just to kind of, because I think that that's been one of our biggest lessons learned so far, is like how we decided on what the seat assignments should be and maybe where we probably need to pivot a little bit going forward. So
Yeah.
I'm just going to throw that back to you.
Yeah, two thoughts. One on the governance, and I know we've talked about this before, but if this is the first time you've heard this, I think it's worth repeating. I remember my first reaction when Nina was kind of going through the governance conversation with me, but also as we were talking in theory about how we engage our clients. And part of me, my initial reaction was like, well, I have to fix governance first. I have to fix making sure that all the rules and all the permissions and all the external share, I had to fix all that stuff. I don't think we had a lot broken in that regard as far as like people having access to things they shouldn't. But in my head, I'm like, I think we need to fix. So stop everything else, stop, and let's fix that first. And then it dawned on me, and Nina helped me realize this. So it was probably more Nina helping me than I figured it out. But is that people already have access to it, right? Like if you have a certain Microsoft 365 licenses like Business Premium, your team already has access to Copilot in the browser today. And so it made me realize that, well, don't stop. Like this is a problem today, whether you want to realize it or acknowledge it or not. So kind of work in parallel is really the message that I took away from that, but we're also delivering because I think that's an important one. Getting to the seat assignments conversation, again, I think that when we were having planning conversations, that's one of the challenges about Microsoft didn't like give anyone the heads up as far as when it was going to be released. It just got released. And so a lot of organizations already had their planning either for the quarter or for the year even done as far as what key initiatives they're going to be working on. Same applied for us. And so we try to figure out, all right, well, let's maybe have let's have some of the department heads, right, and some of the leadership team, like some of those folks that to learn it so they can figure out how it might be applicable to their team and how they might be able to use it. And the problem is those are some of the busiest people in the organization. And lesson learned there is that we had intentions of like participating in the Viva Engage community. We had intentions of making sure it was a part of our weekly meetings and bringing it up and asking about it. But it ended up being the thing that, because of that team being those folks being really busy, that we weren't able to, it was difficult to carve out the extra time, and we weren't intentional enough about it. And when we had some conversations, and even the last session that we did when we spoke with Jake of Dunham, we realized, you know what, we really need to bring this to team members that are working with our clients, that are on the front lines, if you will, and like identify those roles that can really impact the organization. Because really, we have to figure out what roles it's applicable to. And there's only one CEO role. We have only one director of finance. We only have so extending the licenses to those folks. We only have one of those people as far as in those roles. Whereas in sales or service or technical or otherwise, we have a bunch of different people in those roles. And so I think from trying to like understand how we can have a bigger impact on our company, we have to work with the team members and the roles where we have lots of them in the organization and trying to figure out what makes sense. So that's where we're pivoting. That was, I think, a big lesson learned. And we're literally just making this pivot here in the last couple of weeks, candidly. So sometimes I think we're a little slow, but then when I look back, I'm like, we've actually made a lot of progress, but it feels slow in the moment. So, so Nina, maybe that's really, I think, on the seat assignment. So maybe let's dig into that part. And what are some of the things we're doing to help identify and like filter through those people that should be part of this kind of pilot group?
Yeah, so there's actually some really helpful reports in 365 that can give us a little bit of data, and we can see what that usage has been. We can also see, before we deploying these, who's really extensively using Microsoft apps. Because I think that's one thing that we realize, like if
Hmm.
somebody's not extensively using Office, Teams, Outlook, some of the Office products, it doesn't really make sense to get a paid license, because that's the whole point of Copilot for 365, is that integration with those apps. So just a couple of reports. So in the admin center, I actually have put a little breadcrumb down here on how to get there. Obviously, you need to have admin privileges enabled to be able to get in there. So if not, maybe just speak to your admin to pull those reports. And right off the bat, I can tell of the 10 licenses that we deployed, 9 of those are quite active. There's some additional information as you scroll down, what I did is actually just to export this into Excel so I can just demonstrate how this looks. I took away the names, but as you can see from this, I can tell overall last activity date, and then I can see how it's being utilized in the specific apps, whether it's Teams, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, etc. What I did then is just sort top to bottom, and then I think this will be helpful for our conversations going forward, Nate, to say, well, maybe this bottom section down here, and maybe it's not necessarily, well, they don't want to use it. Maybe there's additional training required. So that's
Hmm.
something that we should think about.
Yep.
But, having some conversations with those people and say, do you feel like this is something that you can leverage right now? Maybe it's a time constraint. Maybe we
Yep.
can think about reassigning those moving forward, at least in the interim.
Well, even just an opportunity to poke and say, like, what are you running
Yeah.
into challenges? Are there obstacles?
Yes.
Like, where do you see, like, what's, because and you've said this, and I wholeheartedly agree. It is changing. We're changing behavior. This is not a technology problem. This is a behavior and an education problem in general. And like help, this data gives you at least the opportunity to have the conversation and figure where that's
Hmm.
at. And maybe it isn't the right time because they're busy on projects. And like, add me to the next group 3 months from now or something like that,
Exactly.
right? Or what else is it? So it gives you the data to have the conversation.
There's also a newer dashboard. It's busy deploying now, so you may or may not see that in your tenant, but it's coming over the next couple of weeks. I did put a link down here as well, so aka.ms/copilot dashboard. So this is really leveraging Viva Insights to get some additional data in there. And you can see that there's a couple tabs there. There's one for readiness, and then there's also one for adoption. What I like about this one is it kind of goes a step further than the first report that I showed.
Mm,
I can actually see per app what that usage is. It is interesting to me that the largest area right now is around Teams, which is also helpful to me to think about what other people in the organization might be a good fit for Copilot. Those that are customer facing in a lot of meetings, having to
mm-hmm,
do recaps of meeting action items, those types of things. And that's kind of giving me a sense of perhaps those people, if I'm thinking maybe sales related roles,
mm-hmm,
might be a good fit for this. So yeah, I can tell there by app, and then I can also see some particular features. So we're really drilling down here,
mm.
things like rewriting documents or summarizing email threads and that type of thing. So I think that this would be quite useful. I'm interested to see as more data. This is a pretty new dashboard, so there's not a lot of data in it yet, but as data starts to flow into that, what sort of insights we'll be able to see from there. So that's really the data piece, and yeah, I think I'm also listening to people, as I'm chatting to people within my tech, people that are really keen. They've been, they're chomping at the bit to get a
Mm.
license and have a whole long list of things that they know that they would be able to do with it. Definitely something we want to take into consideration as well. Which brings me to the group charter. So Nate, I'm going to throw that back to you.
Yeah, and I think this was the and the responsibility. I was the one assigned in our organization to like try and help figure out how we're going to drive this forward. Part of it's because I get the privilege of working with Nina on a regular basis. But this is where I really had to look at myself, like, what did I not do well enough? And I don't think I planned enough. I think it was like, let's throw out the licenses and let's see, let's just try and make sure we talk about it. Let's try and make sure we use it. And it definitely wasn't intentional enough. And I think, what I also really appreciate is when we get the opportunity to work with clients and share stories of what they're doing and what we're doing and how do we help each other, because in the end, we all can help each other by sharing. And so I take a lot from, I really appreciated what the conversation last month we had with Jake, where he talked about, look, this is what we're going to do. And so, and he basically said that we're going to do a user group. We're going to have lunches. If you're going to choose to be part of this, you're going to sacrifice your lunch, and we're going to invest in working together. We need to take training. So we actually are following something similar. But one of the things that it was a great idea by Nina is that we wanted to create. So we created the group charter, and this form that Nina's got up there is that we're going to put out a form. We haven't done this yet, candidly. This is literally in the last couple of weeks that we've decided to take this pivot, and we just have been thinking through it as a group. And but say, hey, for those of you in the organization that are interested in participating in this pilot, and we're going to do more 10 or 12 people at most. You get beyond that, it gets it can get a little unruly and the collaboration falls off. So fill out this form and give us a use case, give us a reason why you should be one of those 10 or 12 people. And then also kind of going through some questions. So that's the purpose of this, just going to say, hey, what's the expectations? What are we going to do? We want you to contribute to the Viva Engage community. We want you to maybe help share inside the organization. We want you to be intentional about trying to use it, spend the extra time, be curious, and find some ways where you feel like it's going to be beneficial to your role, so we can choose to have you part of that pilot group. So that's because we do have a lot of people that are like, when am I going to get my license? And we've even had one guy on our team is like, I'll pay for it, just give me the license. He's just really eager to get their hands on it. So but we're trying to be intentional about it. We're trying to just not throw it out without just being thoughtful. And so again, I think sometimes we can move a little slower than what our team wants to do. But so that's where we're starting. So getting the charter out there, basically saying we're putting this group together. I actually think we have multiple locations. I think that we're probably going to have to do this a few times. I would think, maybe 2 or 3 times across different groups, across different departments, different locations, get cross-functional groups together. But I think there's opportunity to do this more than just once. But our goal is to try and start something here shortly and run it through the end of, say, October. And then, start up another group probably in Q4 and roll into Q1 a little bit, et cetera. But the goal is to learn from each other, try, share, post internally and potentially externally, even into the LinkedIn, the Microsoft 365 Champions community. Be a member of that, participate, educate yourself. Before the license, this was a thing I took from Jake, was a great idea. There's a basic training from Microsoft. It's about an hour. It's hour and 45 minutes, something like that. And it's just like getting you started with Copilot. And so we want, before a license is issued, you got to go through that. So we wanted to make sure that we ensure there's some basic training, education, and understanding before we deploy it. And then we're just going to be facilitating, likely weekly or every other week sessions. We haven't got everything scheduled out yet, but shoot for weekly and just do, half hour, 45 minutes over a lunch. And then just be intentional about coming together and keeping that frequency, keeping it top of mind. Hopefully people are then keeping it top of mind when they go back to their desk and are working on things and are trying to be creative about ways in which we can make the tool valuable for our team. I don't know, Nina, what have you found?
Yeah, just a side note there, we will provide links to those Microsoft Learning Path resources as well. I think it's just a really good foundational training to see if this is even something that you do or you are interested in, right, and to show that you have some skin in the game before we actually assign the license. So last lesson here, I think probably the overarching lesson of everything we've just discussed here is that really adoption is a moving target. I think that was kind of our biggest sort of aha moment. And I think in the back of my mind, I know this because we've been doing adoption around 365 in general. And so, why would Copilot be any different? But really just that being intentional that I mentioned earlier, really just regularly assessing what is working, what's not working, where do we need to pivot, where do we need to adjust, which is kind of what we're doing right now. Maybe regularly checking in with some of those stakeholders and champions. I'm thinking if it's not in the schedule, it's not going to happen. So if we need to book this out for the next 6 months, let's just do that. We know this with every other initiative and project we work on. This is no different. And then, just finding really amazing ways within 365, within the app suite like Viva Engage. I'm building out a whole section in our SharePoint intranet now for, resources, collaboration, wanting to do a prompt library so people can submit their ideas and kind of prompts by app or department. That's working really well. So there's a couple things. I don't know, Nate, you probably want to add something there.
Well, I think going back to the the expectations too, I think of like pivoting to this group. I think you also have to be careful of, you know, and I imagine that other leaders, managers, business operators are thinking this, like, okay, so great, I've got to distract my team to at least a subset of my team to figure out something new, and I do believe there's a long-term payoff, but I think you do need to assess, like, if you have a major project going on right now, or maybe this is your busy season or something like that, like maybe this isn't the right time for you to do something like this. But I do think that part of the purpose and part of we did write into this charter, and we'll share that again, not that it's the best charter in the world, but we'll share a sample. So maybe it's something for you to think about to get started. And we're going to share these slides too, by the way. For especially if you want the screenshots of like the reports and know how to get to them and those kind of things. But I think it's important to say, like, look, your day-to-day job, and not trying to you still need to be able to like do your job. I don't want an excuse of like, if exploring Copilot is preventing you from actually serving clients and doing the things primarily that is your primary function and role in the organization, then we can't, like, we have to find a balance. And so if that's taking away from that, then maybe this isn't the right group for you to participate in either. So it's just really trying to work together and just kind of have some clarity around that, because I think that, just like that article where we started this session with, is that there is this is behavior change, which means initially it takes more time, and so being transparent and real and acknowledging that, and trying to make sure that you get the right group of people, and it being the right time in your organization to make some of those adjustments. But I also think it's okay, just now to the adoption is a moving target, Nina, is that like, um, use data, right? Like,
Mhm.
use the data that's available to help you make decisions. It's not going to tell you what to do, but it can inform like where you might need to poke, or maybe what's not working as well as you think it is. And be okay to like self-reflect and be like, yeah, I should have done a better job. Because I can tell you, the Q2, I should have done a better job. I should have known, but like you said, Nina, a lot of the work we've been doing over the last several years has been helping organizations drive adoption and change behavior. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh, well, it's our leadership team. Give them our department heads, give them the tool, and they'll figure it out. But they're busy too. They're, in fact, some of the busiest people, and like, it was just, we weren't intentional about it. I didn't think through it very well. And so having, like, being able to be introspective and look yourself in the mirror and adjust, and that's okay, right? Like, but it's also, I think that's why you want to do it in pilot groups. An example that came up in the conversation I had this morning was that there's a large organization that bought like 20,000 seats of Copilot and deployed it to everybody. And guess what? It didn't really have a good impact. Well, that makes sense, because it's new. It's like, how do we incorporate it? It's behavior change, it's people change, it's process change. It's not a technology problem. It's really a people and behavior change challenge. Not that it's a people problem, but it's a behavior change. And just like any technology that might deploy, it takes time, thought, training, and hand-holding, guidance, prescription, all of those things. I'm not just trying to throw out buzzwords, but all of those things really help. And so starting small with whatever that means for you, if that's 10 folks like it was for us, we're adding another 10 or 12 here in the near future. If that's what it is for you, great start. If that's 2 or 3 people, start with 2 or 3 people. And that's really, I think, what we say is just take the next step that you feel is appropriate for you.
And one last thing, just to add to that, just in conversations with a client yesterday, they're like, this is great for all of these apps, but I think we're going to be intentional about using it specifically with Teams and Excel. And maybe that's another good strategy,
Yeah,
is like,
start there.
let's narrow this down. Let's not try to
Hmm.
spread ourselves too thin by trying to incorporate Copilot in every area of our lives. Let's be intentional about doing it in 1 or 2 apps and kind of start there and
Yep.
see what makes sense.
And that's an example where use the data, right? Where are your people spending a lot of their time? And there are reports that tell you that inside of your 365 admin center, and that might be a great way to inform it. Whether or not it's an organization-wide thing, or even if it's down to a role-based thing. Like, if you get into like, what roles are in finance, what are the tools that finance uses? Okay, well, they're in these 2 tools most of the time. Let's focus on those, right? I think it can help you narrow down where you do spend your effort. That's whether it's organizationally or down to the role, because we do feel that, I know we said it earlier, like, let's be transparent, like, Copilot might not be the best tool for everyone. We do feel like there will be roles that it is a great fit for. And so I think that's the challenge, is like defining what roles and what functions of those roles does Copilot benefit? And so using the data and trying to narrow that focus can really help you get there faster. It's a great point. Well, we're right at time. Look, we just wanted to share. Thanks for attending, watching, whether you're watching now live or in the future. We just are trying to share, drink our own champagne, share our journey. Love to see comments or chats either on YouTube or in LinkedIn, where we also share this information. Because look, there's so many different ways in which AI is going to change our lives. And the way we operate, and we just want to help people accelerate that journey by just sharing. And so if you're willing to share, happy to either have you with chats, conversations, etc. Really, it's just been a great journey, and like we're just scratching the surface. And so stay tuned for part 3, where we're going to dig into more lessons learned. I don't even know what that's going to be yet, because it's probably going to be about the user group or something. But like we're really trying to figure out, like in the moment, this is happening so fast and expanding and growing so rapidly. We're really just trying to do it in the moment, what's happening right now, and sharing that information. So that's what's coming up next. Nina, any final thoughts for next month's session or signing off?
Just final thoughts are just start somewhere.
Yeah. Even it's just educating yourself. Like take the link that we're going to share about the educating the Microsoft Learn. It's free. It's like an hour or so of your time. Just start there and figure out if it makes sense or not. It's a great way to look at it. Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Signing off. See you next month.
Bye.